Namaste. Welcome to Smriti.
Namaste.
Namaste, Raghuram Garu. Thank you so much for coming back again and speaking on topics of yoga and Vedanta. You are walking us on a beautiful journey, giving us glimpses of yoga and Vedanta as well. And that is the purpose of Smriti. We are trying to bring light on our ancient knowledge and wisdom. So when I reached out to you, what is the message that you would deliver to me and to our Smriti viewers? You picked up the mind as an integral part of our system. Can you please shed us some light on the mind, yoga, and Vedanta? And my ears are open to listen to you, that you would deliver. Please, Raghuram Garu, thank you.
Thank you. The way that Vedanta talked about, first of all, I'll come from the Vedanta point of view, then I will take up the yoga way, how it has dealt with. Mm-hmm. Vedanta always looked at human being as a complex personality. At the grossest level, the body, limbs, and all those things, and then at the subtlest level, was the consciousness, the self, consciousness, or the spirit. It's also the same. And in between that, its manifestations, when we look at it, the whole idea of mind as an integral part of human being, basically we have, on one end, we are the consciousness. That's what is Brahman or Atman, what we call it as. Atma, people make it as very esoteric kind of thing, but for me, in Sanskrit literature, Atma is a case. That means I is supposed to be Atma. Instead of saying I, we call it as Atma. So from that consciousness level, all the way up to the body, physical level, which interacts with the world outside. In between, we have these two components which are there, mind and mind-related activities, that is intellect, memory, recollection, analysis, and all that. And then the prana, which is supposed to be supporting the whole bodily activities. So these are the two things that are there. So mind is in between the Indian philosophy, always it included. Whereas the way that the whole idea of our sages talking about spiritual journey is to see that once you transcend the mind, that seemed to be like the last hold for you, then you become one with the self that helps you to meet. This is what seemed to be the idea that Vasishtha gives to Rama in Yoga Vasishtha. In the name of yoga, he says that Mana Prashamana Upaya Yoga Itya Vidiyate. Actually, it is very contextually that he defined about yoga. Valmiki's, Yoga Vasishtha book, where the context was Rama was in depression, despondency, and he was almost like feeling like there is no meaning in living, there is no meaning in dying. So I am completely lost. So it is all supposed to be the mental agitation that was there. It was actually blocking his perception, and that is what Vasishtha gives him the clarity, saying that, look, yoga will help you to take you beyond, because mana prashamana upaya, a trick or a technique to see that your mind calms down. That's what is yoga, so that you can go to deeper perceptions. And the whole text of Yoga Vasishtha is also a text which is giving you the ideas of yoga, how to quieten your mind so that you can go beyond. And another text of Vedanta, which is also supposed to be yoga text, is Bhagavad Gita. That's why in Bhagavad Gita, every chapter we say, Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita su Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyaya Yoga Shastra. All these three things are there. There is Upanishad Vidya, Brahma Vidya, and Yoga Shastra. So therefore, it is like a bridge. And here also, Arjuna was in a context that is, in the battlefield, he had all the responsibility of the fighting the war, but on the other side, he finds his own people he has to kill, and he is instrumental for that. So he was fighting between these two things, and then the best option he thought was to run away from the battlefield. And that's what he reports to Krishna. So it is supposed to be that he has become unnerved because of all this condition situation that was there. Krishna gives him the whole idea of yoga and gives him the definition of yoga, which is contextual, saying that yoga karmasu kaushalam. I will not go into the details of what he meant, but basically wants to push him back into taking care of his job, work, which is basically mind agrees with that kind of a thing. So therefore, these two different types of definition of yoga that is these two people have given. But when it comes to Patanjali, he doesn't have any conditions like that, situations like that. Very scholarly definition that he has given, very directly for a student, a teacher gives the definition. So therefore, basically, manaprashamana upaya, and whatever Patanjali gives us is the chitta vritti nirodha. He calls it as the yoga. And he gives a very clear picture. On one side is the world, and the other side is the you, the consciousness. And then in between you, that these chitta is there. So when chitta is active, it goes into the world outside. And when chitta nirodha takes place, you are in the self. So that whatever that is in between is a chitta, which is supposed to be the mind, and which has got the vrittis.
So chitta is mind.
Chitta is generally the mind stuff, they call it as mind area, in which one of the functions is mind. In fact, the way that we look at the mind is, we have the way that our interaction with the world outside is through our senses. And these senses pick up the details. My eyes pick up, my ears pick up and all that. I need to have a ground on which that all these things are assembled.
Right.
And that ground where all these things, inputs are taken, that's what is supposed to be the mind. And it not only takes the input from all the senses, but it also takes the inputs from the inside. We have several units that are there, like memory is one unit, analysis is another unit. So all these things are picked up and put it there. Like I said, I tell you that there is a sound that suddenly you hear, an input from the ears. Immediately you turn around, see there. What makes you to see that you turn around, see? It is the mind which tells now, come on, eyes, go and see that. Now both these things are related. Yes, that sound of the car is our own car. Like that. And immediately intellect is the one, memory gives the input on that, oh, that sound, it's our own car. So like that, all this coordination takes place at the mind level. So therefore, you can imagine what an amount of activity mind will be having. And we don't have a respite for the mind. Constantly it's going on. But then a state where this mind is quiet, then you are into Swarupa. You are back into yourself. This is the basic idea that is there in the Pramana. But it's not that simple, as I said. Therefore, that Patanjali's greatness is that from the point of view of that quiet state of mind to what is real quiet state of mind deep inside, he makes into several steps. So a quiet state is mind is satisfied or mind is pleasant, and it's supposed to be samadhana. And that samadhana extension is what is called as samadhi. So now this samadhi state of mind, it can be so deeper and deeper and deeper, ultimately out to the level where he says nirvikalpa samadhi. That means to say that samadhi does not have any other ideas which are now sprouting in that. Kalpam means basically that which sprouts. It is that region where there's nothing to sprout there. That means everything is just prior to that. He gives that, why I use that word sprout, because Patanjali himself used it. He's saying that until one point of time it is called as sabija samadhi. That means you have a seed which can sprout. And after that he says that you go into what is called as nirbija samadhi. That means there is nothing like sprouting at all. And in some other cases that is also described as dagdha bijavatu. That means burnt seed. It looks like seed, color is the seed, and consistency consistence is the seed, everything is there. But that particular seed is burned. That means it has no capacity to shape it. That is what is called as the sprouting cannot take place. It's a very simple idea. So that means to say, from the point of view of interacting with the world outside, which is the mind activity, right up to the level where it can go deep inside into the consciousness where no more sprouting is possible. So it must be a big journey, and that's where Patanjali's extraordinary performance of dividing into various levels of samadhi. And people have, and they're all there within us, because we are consciousness on one side, the world outside, therefore all these things are within us, and we have whether it is Nirvikalpa Samadhi or anything like that, there is nothing that we need to get it by doing something. And there is another point is that whatever that you get by doing something, if you don't do that thing, then it will go away. So it cannot be resultant of doing something. And second idea is that the vritti, that means interacting with the world outside, is all doing. And that self is the only thing where you are state of being. So a being cannot be a product of doing. Doing can be product of being. From Brahman, all this creation has come. But then by doing something that I cannot go to the state of being, therefore, the whole of yoga is how I can systematically, very in a knack, in a tricky way, how I can see all the doing, I get rid of it, and then I go deep inside to the being. That's what is the idea. So the evidence for that is that we already have that. Once it so happened when Ramakrishna was 7-year-old boy, Gadadhar, 7 years I think, he was walking along with his family members in the field in the evening after finishing the work in the field. Then he was returning back home. While returning back home, and imagine the conditions in Bengal at that time, it was plain land, so there were miles and miles together green carpet, and that's what is the crop that was there. And then meeting with the horizon, and then you can see pitch dark clouds that are there in the horizon. And on top of it, actually the setting sun on the other side had created a beautiful rainbow. And the scenery is so pleasant to see. As if that beauty is not enough, a flock of white swans, beautifully they're flying across the sky. You know how they cross, they just like, dance, a swan dance kind of a thing that they have done. As if that beauty is not sufficient, the setting sun was reflecting on the wings of that birds with golden arms. So imagine that the birds, white birds, and then looking golden and with the rainbow around, with a green carpet underneath, everything looks so ecstatic, so enchanting. Ramakrishna, as a small boy, Gadadhar, he was just absolutely arrested by looking at them. So arrested, even anybody else would have been really stunned by looking at such a situation. And he was so stunned that he stopped his breath, he stopped walking, he was just standing there like a statue. And the people, they turned around, this boy is not coming. They saw that this boy was just standing there. They came to him, tried to shake him. There is no movement at all. Then they tried to feel that his breath also is not going on. They decided that he died. Maybe some insect has killed him, so they cried and all that. And the stiff boy, they lifted him up, and then they walked home crying. And they walked home maybe a few minutes and something like that. And then by the time they put him down on the ground, he immediately got up. He got up with the joy on his face and smile and everything. They were shocked. They said, "What happened to you? We thought that you are bitten by some snake or something like that, and then you are lost life." But he said, "No, I'm very happy." Anyway, boy did not die, so therefore they were satisfied with that. They did not make any further inquiry on that, just left that like that. Later on, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, when he was the priest in the Kali temple, and that is when he was doing all kinds of sadhana, meditation, all that. When Totapuri came, and he was one of his teachers, and then said, come on, you have to do the Advaita sadhana, and then pushed him into that sadhana. And when he pushed him into sadhana, Ramakrishna was once again deep into samadhi for almost like 3 days. He did not have any consciousness outside. And then Totapuri was eagerly waiting, and then after 3 days, Ramakrishna came out into consciousness, said, what happened? What kind of an experience? He said, oh, this I saw when I was 7-year-old. That means such an extraordinary, exalted state of samadhi was there for a 7-year-old boy. It must be there with all of us. So therefore, that all these states are within us. But only thing is that now we don't remember that, we don't have any idea that we have all those things, forgotten conveniently. But what Patanjali gives us, the beauty of it is that he shows us that here and there you have glimpses of that particular experience of a quiet state of mind, which is degree at various levels they are available. So that is why first chapter of Patanjali itself is about the mind and then various levels of quiet state of mind. Agitative state of mind is what that is there in the world outside. We have agitations of various types, whether it is anger, hatred, jealousy, all those things are there. They're all outside. But then when you go inside, there is such a huge wealth of quiet state of mind within you. And that Patanjali gives us systematically. See, talking something about inside and so systematically, it's a genius work. That's why there cannot be any better person than Patanjali who could give us these details, such a lucid way. This is what basically the idea of yoga. So now when you look at it, the main thrust of yoga is about the mind and then how to go to the consciousness as our nature. And this body and outside things are supposed to be only just a vehicle that we are holding it, not beyond that. So Patanjali, therefore, in fact, as I look at the Patanjali's ideas, he looked at human being as only two different aspects of it. One is the prana and the other is the mind. Now, when you look at the Upanishads also, they always talk about mind and quietening the mind and transcending the mind. And he says that Brahman is that where yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha. That means to say where mind cannot reach, yato vacho nivartante, where the walk cannot reach, and aprapya manasa saha, even the mind cannot reach there. Anandam brahmano vidvan na bibheti kutaschaneti. This is what Taittiriya Upanishad says about you are in the state of blissful being. Similarly, Mandukya Upanishad, while explaining about the deep state, he says that there the mind is not there. Aprano hyamana shubhra, that's another Upanishad says. So you cross the mind and then go to that state. So whatever that is the Vedanta talking about, crossing the mind and going to that quiet state, that's what Patanjali gives us in this way. So that is why on the first day when I said that yat prapya sankyate sthanam tad yogaira pragamyate, like that Bhagavad Gita Krishna says about that. So in that sense, all of these texts are talking about mind and then going to the state where we cross the mind. We go beyond the mind.
I have a question here.
Yeah.
So is mind a hurdle then?
Mind is not a hurdle. In fact, that's a very, very important question. That is, mind has a nature to function in that way. See, what has a quality of functioning like that is the one which can be stilled. Like a pendulum which has free movement can only be brought to a still position. And wandering, going around is the natural quality of the mind. And because of that only we are interacting with the world outside. That's what Upanishad says. Chanchalam hi mano dharmaha yadavakne jwalenacha. Like the way nature of fire is to burn, nature of mind is to go around. So therefore, what can go around can come back home. So therefore, basically, we know how to take the mind out, but we have not training how to come back to the self. So it is like the way legendary Abhimanyu, who knows how to get into the chakra vyuha, he doesn't know how to come out of it. We are like that legendary Abhimanyus in the process. So yoga empowers that way to come back to ourselves. Mind is a wonderful tool for us. In fact, we need to understand one more thing, is that mind which is so easy, freedom to go around, is the mind which can be quietened. It is like the way, analogy is that if you see somebody who's tightrope walker, walking on the tightrope, you see that he is absolutely free, is completely lubricated on that particular rope. He is not tied. So he can move, he can easily swing from right to left, left to right and all that. Such a person only can really balance on the rope. The same way, mind which is sharp, which is really very good, which can really follow the senses very happily, and we are happy with that mind, then only that mind can be brought to quietude. So this is the basically the idea that it says, and that quiet state is also within us. That quiet state is not outside of us; it's there within us. And when the children, when you look at the children, when they are not so much influenced by the world outside, when you look at them, they can very easily see that they come to a state where they're absolutely quiet inside. They may be doing some activity or the other, but then so quiet inside, anything does not enter into them. They may be fixing something, playing something with their hands and all those things. They're sitting, and then by the side of it, big sound happens, and then you shout 3-4 times. Doesn't even listen. That shows that nothing from outside entering into him. Is on one side is busy, on the other side is very quiet. And this quietude is the samadhi that they are in. You can always see that. But as we have grown up, we have come out of that. Mm-hmm. Nothing, no stimulus from outside can enter into it. Great scientists are also like that. They may be engaged in some activity, but apart from that small little activity in that corner, but otherwise, the large amount of the mind is just not responding to the world outside. That's why we have such examples that is there. Einstein, Newton was so focused in doing some activity. His friend came, sat down there. And then Newton's attention was not outside. And then after a while, somebody brought lunch for Newton and then went away. And this man, it is lunchtime, is also feeling hungry. So he quietly opened that lunch box and finished it and then kept it back original position. Another half an hour, 1 hour later, that Newton suddenly opened his eyes. Probably he felt hungry. He opened the lunch box and saw that, oh, I already finished my lunch. That means he doesn't even know what's happening outside. So that's why scientists and all that, they are supposed to be great spiritual people, because they have that silence inside. They do not get any stimulus from outside. Nothing can really bother them. So this is the glimpse of about yoga, the quiet state of mind that we have. So therefore, the samadhi is nothing but samadhana, peaceful state within us. So there are different levels of samadhi that Patanjali talks about. These are all samadhi levels in our mind. And before even that, what really bothers our mind? He gives 5 different ways that we are engaged in the world outside. So logical, rationally, he puts it together. One is that pramana, that means whatever that you perceive, that immediately gets into the mind. And pramana, the second thing is viparyaya, vikalpa, nidra, smriti. Vikalpa, pramana, viparyaya, that means to say there is some information from outside, a large amount of information from outside, but I conclude by adding little imagination from my side. That is what is viparya. And the classical example is that I see big smoke that is coming up. So naturally I infer that there must be fire there. I have not seen fire, but I inferred that. So that means to say there is 100% what you see outside, and then there is something, second level is where I see about 70% outside, 30% is my imagination. And then this third is that vikalpa. That means to say here, I might have seen only 30% of the world outside, 70% is my imagination. And that imagination sometimes can be right, sometimes can be wrong. I see the clouds hanging, big heavy cloud that are there on my head. I said, I'm just sure that it's going to rain now. But then suddenly I don't know, big wind comes and then these uh, clouds are driven about 15 miles away, and then I'm totally dry, rain falls 15 miles later. So this is what is viparya. My imagination did not work there. Sometimes imagination works, sometimes it works. So therefore, pramana, viparya, vikalpa, see, look at the way, the immense amount of outside becoming less and less, and then my interference is becoming, my imagination becoming more and more. And then the next one is nidra. Nidra is where no outside, no inside. You are sleeping. And then last one is smriti. Smriti is absolutely your own memory, all those things. There's no outside at all. So therefore, basically, if you look at draw a graph, it's coming from 100% outside to 100% inside. A beautiful way. So this is what is our mind functioning. This is how basically the way that Patanjali gradually takes us about all these ideas. There's another very important idea that he gives. It's also, he says that vritti sarupya mitaratraha. Vritti identifies us with the world outside. Vritti actually takes us into the world outside. But over a period of time, it identifies us with the world outside, sarupyam. The sarupyam, swarupa is our own nature, but here sarupyam means basically something else takes the position of swarupa. It is like the way that in the beginning that I see, and then I feel nice and I go closer to it. So then first thing is that samipya, I go closer. But then after some time, that so happens that I'm so attached to that. This is what is sayujya. And then the last one is that I become that. That's what is sarupya. So our mind, it is not just one time going outside, is not creating problem for us. Vritti, I do outside and then come back, it's okay. But repeatedly when you do it, step by step, you become identified with that. So much that we identified that today we don't even have any glimpse of an idea that we are consciousness. We are only body, we are only matter. Whatever that is there, material outside, same way that we are also. What a big damage that we are consciousness inside, and then we have forgotten that nature and we think that we are the body. And then I try to shape this body, I try to make this body this way, that way, or those things. So the whole people of yoga are now therefore caught up in the body level. They forgot that they are the consciousness. That's the reason why this yoga and Vedanta have to go hand in hand together. Understand better way. That is the idea.
So like stressing on doing and being. So
right.
Is there a deliberate, unfortunately, we have to deliberately do something to
We have to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Doing is peripheral. And you do the periphery, whatever that you do, and then get back home. You don't get caught up in that. So that is the idea. In fact, what happens is, your doing will be much more efficient if you know how to go back to your being. Because all our doings, this vritti, he calls it as, also as another, from the same root, we have another word called vrittam. Vrittam means circle. And circle, periphery is something which is like a wheel moving. But the core, center is something, axle does not move. So you are the axle, and the vritti, what you do is like this circle, like the wheel. And you carry not only one wheel, you carry several wheels. And one wheel that you carry is that you are a daughter, another wheel is that you are a husband, you are a wife, you are mother, you are father. And then another thing is you are an official working outside. So that means to say the same central core, that is the axle, several wheels are mounted around that. So on us, that there are several wheels are mounted on us. And then we perform, very efficiently we perform. But efficiently, when can we perform is when I leave one wheel and come onto the other wheel. If I hold on to one wheel and then from there I want to manage this wheel, then that is where the efficiency is lost.
Nice.
Like husband, like a person is a husband for a wife, but he's also a surgeon, a very efficient surgeon. That's another circle. There's another circle, but the wheel, but the axle is him. And then he can so easily do so many things. Whenever he does any complicated surgery, he can even blindfolded like Gandhari, he can do the surgery. All those things can be possible. But the same thing that he has to do a very simple surgery on his wife, then he finds it difficult. Hands will be shaking, legs will be shaking. Is in the form of Arjuna. Why? Because the performance of the surgery requires a surgeon there. But here is a husband standing there. Husband cannot do the surgery. Husband should get out of that place. Then only surgery can be possible. And this is a psychological posture. We should be able to get out of it. Exactly happened with Arjuna also. Arjuna is standing there as a chief of the army. But the way that he is expressing himself, I'm a wonderful student. I'm a great student of Drona. And my grandfather used to like me very much and all that. Arey, you are standing here as a warrior, not any of those things. You know, Krishna is very compassionate. He talks to him nicely. Probably if I were to be standing there, I would have beaten him.
True. Yeah. It's very
So
nice.
come out of that circle. That's the idea.
I like your model. So you have brought out a beautiful picturization, and definitely it's such a wonderful tool. And thank you so much, Raghuram Garu, for a wonderful glimpse of how to carry your mind if we think we are carrying, and really integrate yoga and the wisdom through Vedanta and make a difference. That was beautiful. Thank you, viewers, for watching this episode. Visit us back again. We have more on yoga and Vedanta talks by N.B. Raghuram Garu. Thank you, Andy. Thank you all.